Jiang Chen listened to the boss's claims that the terrible project was failed, and he only pretends to work overtime. But there are no results. The bristly man was tired of looking at the floor, and the boss shouted that he was a discharge and asked what his miserable life was standing at all. Then the boss could not stand it, and with anger threw a glass ashtray into the man, which crashed against his head. From such an unexpected throw, Jiang Chen could not dodge, as a result of which he fell to the floor, and in his eyes it became darker. He lay in a puddle of his own blood, wondering if it was death, but did not be upset, because he considered himself loser. The system notified that the owner was dead and the connection was interrupted. But then the revival process began and the binding was successfully completed. The boss shouted to stop pretending to be, and Jiang Chen remembered that he still needs to make a report, meet customers, and endure screams. The young man began to slowly rise to his feet and asked for forgiveness from the boss, trying to recover after losing consciousness. But he was very surprised when he saw in front of him a crowd of men of sports physique, who were dressed in white and blue tracksuits. The exhausted Jiang Chen realized that Leong and his associates, after which he wondered if he was still sleeping. All of them at that moment were in the upper left corner of the huge football field, which was a kind of attraction of the city. The hero again dreamed of the school, and he said that he was expelled because of Liana, and without a certificate was not taken for any work. But still, they took an office clerk. But even in this way, he was able to become only a sales consultant in a second-rate company, which did not please him at all. The furious Jiang Chen jabbed a finger at Liana and shouted that all because of him, who was relied on with the money of his parents, and added that he was not capable of anything. For these words, a hit was immediately struck in his chest cage, which the young man did not expect at all and was bored with pain. The young man experienced an incredible pain at that moment to him that this was not a dream at all, because he extremely realistically felt severe pain. He grabbed a rowing grass and made an attempt to rise from his knees, still experiencing severe chest pain. In Liangi, Jiang Chen looked intimidatingly into his eyes, grabbing his hair, after which he asked to repeat what was said. Jiang Chen smiled and asked whether it was true that the case when Liangi was harassed by their classmates, and he prevented him, putting in an awkward position. After that, the main character boldly spat aside, which even more angered the young man, but he simply let go of the hero's head. Lianya said that he was ended, and his associates were ready, and asked the elder to break his daring guy's leg. Jiang Chen smiled again and said that it was just a dream, and asked unless something would happen to him. One of the guys asked if he could take advantage of the reception to which Liangi taught him, but he replied that the school force reception is a little worse. The hero realized that this was something related to cultivation, and the young man broke a jacket on himself, using a barbaric trick. Seeing a healthy man with a good physique, the main character was a little confused and began to run away in a panic. But he was not going to let him do it. A huge guy waved to the loose Jiang Chen with his firm and a very strong fist, frightening him even more. The system notified the confused protagonist that a mortal threat to his life was discovered. When the enemy's fist was a millimeter from his face, Jiang Chen closed his eyes tightly, and the system notified that the protection system was activated. The young man was very surprised because the enemy's fist did not hurt him, because the complete suppression of damage was activated. The shocked big man changed his face with surprise, and with a relief of the exhaled Jiang Chen, he was glad that he did not hurt at all. Jiang Chen with a mockery asked the bully, "He really ate little porridge, and he needs to tease him," so that he began to fight. The bold expression of the guy angered the thugs even more, and he rushed at him again. But the damage was completely crushed again. The guy was dumbfounded. Then he did not cause damage, after which the main character made his move and hit with all his strength between his legs. He called the ally with an idiot by Leong, because he did not even use the power of blood, and ordered the other two to deal with Jiang Chen. The muscular guys immediately torn sweaters on themselves and rushed enthusiastically into battle against the loose-looking boy. The trinity of the healthy men were ready to tear the victim, but Jiang Chen himself was absolutely calm and relaxed at that moment. The hero shouted that they were just the scum of society, which could only mock the weaklings, threatening guys and girls. The system notified him that the threat of mortal damage was discovered, after which he was thrown aside with 3 broken ribs. The young man felt full in ribs and slipped several meters on his back, not understanding how this happened. Jiang Chen still remained conscious and wondered what had just happened and why the system did not protect him. Nothing threatens the hero's divine defense. But now he has received damage, and all this happened because of his weakness. A voice in his head told the owner that this was not a dream, and his past body died as a result of a blow, and now he is 18 again, but he is dying again. It was also added that the revival was impossible, and the phrase about 100% suppression was repeated while Zhang Chan was beaten with his feet. In the end, he was scored with his feet, and after a while he began to recover and said that this dream was very long. From misunderstanding, Zhang Chen jumped slightly forward, being in a hospital bed and being wrapped in bandages in different places. Logically, the excited protagonist began to look around and wondered if he was in the hospital. He began to consider his body with trepidation and recall the recent events that occurred to him. Zhang Chen began to gradually recall how a crowd of hooligans beat him earlier, but he could not resist them. As a result of illumination, the young man jumped from a hospital bed to quickly look at the mirror. Looking in the mirror, Zhang Chen became convinced that he was alive and wondered, was it really not a dream at all? The system said that if the owner is in critical condition, the function of self-healing is triggered, which the hero called a useful function. He said that he could not remember that the system was talking to him and asked if he could see her. The voice said that the owner could open the panel where all the necessary information will be, but he must present it, after which it will appear. Zhang Chen did everything, and he saw a panel on which all the information was set out, but he did not understand why only 27 points of damage. He realized that the damage indicator is the moment when the protection and the heavenly protection system, which is a passive skill, works. The effect lies in the fact that if the enemy has the same level as the hero, he absorbs 100% of damage, turning it into an indicator of damage. If the force of the attack is 10, which is within the level of the hero, then he completely converts this blow into additional damage points for himself. If the power of the attack is 10, but a person has a level above the hero, then the absorption will be equal to half, and the damage indicator increases by 5. Zhang Chen found out that the damage indicator can be exchanged in the store for attributes, but said that he was reborn to take revenge and not get on the head. The system notified that daily for 3 hours the hero must perform a set of training, and in case of failure to fulfill, he will receive a punishment. Suddenly, someone jerked the door handle, and the young man pretended to be unconscious, and the girl did not understand why he still had not woke up if the wounds were healed. But still, the nurses saw that Zhang Chen woke up, and one of them joyfully asked if he was feeling any discomfort. The young man smiled at me and asked how he ended up here, because he did not remember anything at all. The nurse said that his classmate Dean Lin brought him here and said that he was not missing the school, but he would have to stay here for another 5 days. Dean Lin was the first beauty of the academy, and in Liana in a last life he got her. But Zhang Chen tried to prevent this, even nothing came of it. In this life, the main character also decided to join in a classmate, for which I received from Liana, but did not think that the girl would save him. Slightly alarmed nurses looked in surprise at the silent patient who looked their eyes. He said that his head was spinning, and the nurse said that these are the consequences from the concussion, and he should rest more. Leaving, the girl asked him not to move and let him know if something happens, and the main character only silently looked after the nurses. The young man wondered if they had seen a digital scoreboard that reminded of the opposite report and the remaining time. After that, Zhang Chen exhaled with relief and completely lay down, realizing that he would have to somehow adapt to this world, because he was still waiting for the examination. Then the protagonist drew attention to the backpack on the shelf and realized that the classmate Dean Lin and the backpack grabbed him. He understood that he was still too early and decided, for a start, to read the story, after which he discovered a book lying in a backpack. For the first time, spiritual energy appeared on Earth about 300 years ago, and absorbing it, a person can increase his physical power. Over time, research became sophisticated and a special system was created, divided into several categories. Only 3 categories, each of which was divided into 3 more, and the study of each direction led to an increase in combat power several times. There were 3 main methods of cultivation, the first of which was the absorption of spiritual energy with the help of exercises. The second way was the absorption of pills and all kinds of treasures, which was also a very effective way. And finally, the third way was to gain experience in the dungeon, which was much more dangerous than the previous 2 ways. According to rumors, followers of the third direction could crack mountains and rivers with their feet and punch the void with their hands, and they stand at the top of human evolution. Zhang Chen said that he did not even reach the lowest border, the kingdom of combat life in a large world, so it is not surprising that they mocked him. It seemed to the hero that now, when it was ending, he forgot about something. But still, he drove himself off these thoughts and decided, for a start, to sleep. The exhausted young man put the book aside and completely relaxed his body, trying to relax and plunge into sleep. The system notified him that the deadline for completing the assignment and the owner would be punished. And excited, Zhang Chen did not understand what was happening. Suddenly, a portal appeared like a black hole that began to suck into himself. Alarmed Hero more and more. The blue-eyed hair Zhang Chen was blown in the wind, and he shouted with fear because he did not understand what was waiting for him next. After a few seconds, a black hole spit out a helpless guy who hit his head on the floor. The hero said that the desire to complete this task was not even burning, and wondered what kind of punishment was, and what will happen next. Then the young man drew attention to strange sounds and turned, seeing a huge creature crawling to him like an octopus. The tentacles of a huge vile creature were prickly, and it immediately waved to the bewildered Zhang Chen, who froze in place. The dumbfounded and terrified, the frightened protagonist screamed with fear and did not understand what kind of creature it was and what to do. The monster at an incredibly high speed waved his thorny tentacles. Even more frightening, the bewildered guy. Zhang Chen tightly closed his eyes and understood that he couldn't dodge, so it remains only to try to reduce damage and set the block. The vile creature did not stop and struck the prickly tentacle right in the place where the block was placed with his hands. The blow turned out to be very powerful, as a result of which the block did not help, and the main character spat out a little blood, being dumbfounded. All this did not cost all this, and after a few seconds, Zhang Chen slipped a few meters on his back. The dissatisfied Zhang Chen asked what was happening and why he was beaten again, if in reality he was already beaten more than once. The system replied that his goal is to evade the blow 50 times, after which the hero with later on his face looked at the huge creature behind. Nevertheless, the young man decided not to panic and remembered that he had already died once, so he would definitely cope with these vile tentacles. Then the guy shouted at the top of his voice that everything would happen right here and now and rushed on the attack on a huge creature. The monster continued to attack the protagonist, who was collected and successfully left his attacks aside. Smiling, Zhang Chen realized that the speed is not so important, and the main thing is the prediction of the opponent's movement. But the main character rejoiced too early, because it was impossible to relax, and the monster decided to attack him from the back. As a result of a powerful blow by the tentacle, one of the teeth of a young man flew out, and he barely remained conscious. The next blow was so powerful that the young man slipped on his back again, not understanding how this happened. Holding onto the scratched cheek, the angry Zhang Chen looked at the monster and realized that he had already managed to rebuild behind his back. Then, a series of strokes of the tentacles was also inflicted, the last of which forced the protagonist to be baked in pain. After a few seconds, he barely remained conscious, while the whole abrasions and scratches were visible throughout his body. The monster did not even think to stop, after which Zhang Chen struck his leg with one of his sharp and prickly tentacles. At the same moment, the tentacle was stuck out of the young man's punched leg, and he fell to his knee because he had no more strength. The main character experienced incredibly severe pain, and he could no longer resist and just fell to the floor. Lying in a small puddle of blood, Zhang Chen said very sluggishly that he was painful and he could not move. Then, he completely lost consciousness, and the system activated the recovery function because the owner was in critical condition. After successful activation of the recovery function, Zhang Chen began to gradually recover, and the wounds on his body were delayed. In the arena, punishment and healing are many times faster, and after a few seconds the hero's restoration was completed. Once again, the monster attacked Zhang Chen Tuopalz, but the young man only grinned and asked if this was a sudden attack. A deft movement of the body, the young man managed to evade the blow of the tentacles, which was a very good result. The hero proudly said that now that he is used to the speed of the opponent, you can try something new. Zhang Chen understood that he was already used to the enemy's movements, and he also felt some kind of pulsating warmth was bent inside. The young man also understood that this warmth slightly modifies his physical condition, allowing him to control the body at times better. The inspired young man told the monster that he was 100 meters from him and asked to attack while being ready for everything. Then the main character confidently said that today he would overcome the vile monster and will certainly get out of here. The monster, meanwhile, froze in one place and looked coldly at a self. Confident young man poked a finger at him, but suddenly, the monster's eyes turned red even more, and composure changed to thirst for revenge and rage. Around Zhang Chen, many sharp tentacles of the monster appeared, and he himself was a little confused and realized that now he was the end. The young man tried to put the block and understood that he could not survive and now he would definitely die, because he was surrounded from all sides. After a few seconds from incredible pain, He lost consciousness and lay on the floor, and steam came from his body. The whole body of the young man was numerous cuts and deep scratches, and abrasions were on his face. The system realized that the owner was again in critical condition, after which the function of self-healing was activated and the scratches began to heal. Jiang Chen came to his senses, but despite the fact that all the wounds on his body dragged on, the pain was still present and did not leave him. The hero said that the pain from the beatings remained. Moreover, the warm stream of energy continued to rage in the body, which was very noticeable. The young man said that while he was able to recover, he still has hope, so the hero was not going to give up at all. Jiang Chen smiled in the face of the enemy and said that he would try to fight him again, because he is still alive and standing on his feet. The monster did not hesitate and immediately attacked him with many tentacles, but the main character managed to repel attacks. The progress of the assignment gradually increased, but suddenly, the owner received damage from the tentacle and the counter was diligent. The self-healing function was again used, after which Jiang Chen exclaimed that he wanted to try again. The anger and thirst for revenge at that moment moved the main character, who, gritting his teeth, again rushed into battle. The clock went, and the progress of completing the assignment either increased, then once again he was reset. But Jiang Chen was not going to give up. Ultimately, the progress of the execution reached 50, and the exhausted protagonist looked at the defeated monster. The system informed the owner that he was testing, after which the return to the former world began. After some time, Jiang Chen sat on a hospital bed and read a book, being very concentrated and involved. In the ward, the Western nurse, who said that his injury was only dragging on, and he was already studying, and the young man replied that the exams would begin soon. A little excited nurse said that he should miss the exam, and Jiang Chen asked why she was saying so. The girl said that today he came with Leong, who wanted to get to him and threatened that he would be beaten out as soon as she saw outside the hospital. She added that Jiang Chen was excluded from the list passing the exam due to communication, and the guy, which struck the main character at that moment. The first few seconds, the shocked young man simply looked at the nurse silently, trying to formulate the speech. The furious Jiang Chen, with a loud scream, asked if his admission to the exam was really cancelled. The nurse said that it was better for him to stay here and relax. Otherwise, he might face the danger when he went out in the hospital. Before leaving, the girl called the guy a poor thing and said that in their time it was difficult to remain a good person, which he was. She looked around at the gaze at the window of Jiang Chen, who answered nothing and began to silently reflect on what was happening. In the thoughts of an angry young man, he said that Lianya was familiar with what he could imagine, and he did not even know what to do next. Then the young man tightly squeezed his fist of an insidious smile, said that it comes out, he needs to be even worse. Jiang Chen received a system notification of the daily task, namely, he had to carry out strength training in 3 hours. The main character grinned slightly and thought in his thoughts that 3 hours would not be enough to deal with the bastard with Liana. After some time, the young man sat in a bed, being very serious and as concentrated as possible. The young man received a notification that the deadline for completing the assignment expired and he will be moved to the arena of punishment. The chamber again appeared a portal, like a black hole, which immediately began to suck the helpless Jiang Chen. The system notified the protagonist that the purpose of the task is to evade monsters 50 times. This time, the young man was not at all confused and confidently smiled at the monsters, saying that it was time to start. A small crowd of dexterous monsters with red heads immediately rushed at Jiang Chen, wanting to tear him around. The protagonist concentrated as much as possible on the assignment and remained cold-blooded, which gave him the opportunity to dodge. He did not give the monsters a single chance, and after a short period of time, the task was completed. Standing in the middle of a thick smoke, harsh in appearance to Jiang Chen in a torn shirt, looked at the notification table. As a reward for the task completed, the protagonist received an increase in the blood and energy of Qi. The surprised guy said that he already feels how he was getting stronger, but he was still far from the insidious Leong. Jiang Chen decided that in any case, at first he needed to leave the arena of punishment, and then thought over further actions. But suddenly the digital scoreboard disappeared, which made the young man be nervous and wondering what was happening. The system notified that it was possible to challenge the hammer of the abyss, and an increase in blood and Qi was the reward for execution. The hero understood that if this task was completed, he could reach the kingdom of martial arts, and Liangi would no longer be his opponent. Without thinking twice, he agreed to the task and asked not to forget his true goal in this arena. Then the digital scoreboard disappeared, and under his feet Jiang Chen felt a trembling that made him nervously examine. The young man was very wary because the stones poured from the ceiling, and from behind he heard the strange sounds of someone's approach. Suddenly, a huge head of a metal snake approached the bewildered Zhang Chan, which was very unexpected. The monster at the same moment knocked down the guy who was not expecting a guy from his feet with his incredible power and an iron core. The main character was very alert and did not understand what the hell was happening before his eyes. The metal monster looked furiously at the guy, and the system notified him that it was necessary to hold out for half an hour. Zhang Chen admitted that this creature is not without reason called boss, but holding out for half an hour because he has a recovery function. He decided not to hesitate and began to deftly evade the powerful blows of the metal monster, jumping from side to side. But after a few seconds, the guy became convinced that the chimera would not wait for the moment until he was completely recovering. The monster tried to attack the young man again and again, but Zhang Chen was not going to give up and ran away with all his might. The guy made a jump to the side, but the chimera opened his mouth wide, trying to absorb a flipped boy. Zhang Chen fell on the stone floor, coming to the realization that a bloodthirsty monster really wants to kill him. The system notified the owner that he received serious injury, and the recovery duration increased, and the effectiveness decreased. This notification very much alerted the protagonist at that moment, and he was a little nervous, and the monster slowly approached him. Zhang Chen fell to the floor and set the block, hoping that it would somehow save him, and the iron monster prepared to strike. Then, an incredibly powerful blow to two fists, which destroyed the stone floor, was delivered with a furious chimera. The main character lay all in scratches and abrasions, shouting that he was very painful and realizing that he was about to die. The system will notify the owner that he will die soon and he needs to leave the arena, and the young man reached for the button that allows you to do this. Zhang Chen suddenly dawned on her. She rolled his mind. He began to recall how he was subjected to beatings and humiliation in the past, as well as the case when the boss threw an ashtray into him. The young man understood that now the same thing was happening as in the past, and he was beaten and broken again. The hero wondered, unless he could repeat everything. But he told himself that he could not allow everything to happen again. He began to press the button for the cancellation of the return to the arena, saying that if he could not change anything, then there is no point in all this. Zhang Chen shouted at the top of his voice that he would definitely change everything, and the iron monster at that moment threw him aside with a blow. The main character flew a few meters back and hit his back against the wall, but at the same time he managed to remain conscious. The young man understood that it was very dangerous to fight this monster, so it is necessary to use its tactics to move. The left eye of Zhang Chan at that moment twitched, and in his thoughts he said that he was probably dead for several minutes. Nevertheless, the hero decided that he had to calm down and reminded himself that this monster was not only extremely strong, but also not to take speeds. But also, in the process of the duel, the young man drew attention to the fact that with the brains of the monster, everything is not very good. This meant that the attacks of a silly monster is very easy to predict what would play in the hand of the guy. The guy decided to take advantage of the shocks to increase the distance, but he realized that it was not so easy to dodge. However, Zhang Chen could predict the direction of the blow, and fortunately there was a lot of space for maneuvers in the arena. The young man understood that he only needed not to be clamped in the corner and pressed to the ground in order to succeed in a duel. The huge monster once again tried to attack the guy, but he managed to deftly jump aside and not get damage. Zhang Chen analyzed the situation and said in his thoughts that there was a lot of space in the arena, so he can move freely. Minutes walked, and the main character tried his best to hold out for half an hour. Although he fell into the hands of the monster, the huge monster did not leave an attempt to knock the young man off his feet. But Zhang Chen was not going to give up and deftly left the attacks. But at one point, the young man still miscalculated and fell under the enemy's blow, as a result of which he was thrown into the wall. In his thoughts, the hero said that he was very painful and he could not move, and also felt that he was about to lose consciousness. The bloodthirsty monster approached him and wide opened his mouth, and Zhang Chen repeated in his head that he had to hold out. Also, the main character told himself a strong spirit that he had to resist the system and was not going to give up. Nevertheless, the restraint and patience of Zhang Chen brought their fruits, and he lasted the necessary half an hour, and the monster was defeated. Soon, the exhausted protagonist was in a hospital bed and rolled clothes and exhaled because everything finally ended. On the second day, he received as a reward of increasing blood and chi, and the young man himself enthusiastically engaged in reading the book. The book wrote that a person studying cultivation is able to accumulate qi and blood and then transform them. Zhang Chen held his blood and qi energy in his hand, saying that he managed to become a master of martial arts. He received a task in which it was necessary to score 100 points of damage during the exam, and the hero realized that it was time to step on the Leong. A thorough inspection was carried out before the exam, and the students fled to look at the fight from Leong, who was provoked on it. In the meantime, the bandaged Zhang Chen, who stood in front of many students and was going to make a statement, was on the stands. The protagonist, with the help of a loudspeaker, turned to Liana and said that he was here, so he needed to hurry. Liana did not respond to his urge, and the young man began to get angry even more, after which he shouted his name again. The puzzled students did not understand why he was doing this, and one of them suggested that Zhang Chen escaped from a psychiatric hospital. Two guys ran to inform Liana, realizing that if they could get his respect, then they will be provided with a bright future. Zhang Chen, meanwhile, thought a little and realized that he still needed to overcome the situation because this is not enough. In a loudspeaker, he said that Liana has a shameless geek, which he only does what he is looking for his own rats. He also mentioned Dean Lin, and finally asked why Dad at Liana did not isolate a mutated person if accepted. Then the hero said that today he not only declares this idol of the war, but also wants to supplement his speech with a small ad. An inspired guy confidently stated that starting today, Beauty Dean Lin would become his girlfriend. He threatened that if Liana dares to approach her again, then he will break all the limbs to him and deprive him of the ability to continue his family. One of the students told his associate that this guy would die if he really dares to speak out against Leong. Another guy wondered if Zhang Chan really lived so badly, and his friend said that next year they would see him at the Chinmen festival. Din Lin, meanwhile, stood aside with a friend who said that Zhang Chen admitted her love, but the upset girl was silent. She was worried about the protagonist who behaved like an upstart, and wondered, is he not afraid of Liana and what she was thinking about? Nevertheless, the girl reminded herself that Zhang Chen had already helped her, so she must help him this time. The main character, meanwhile, was still standing on the rostrum and heated the situation with the help of a loudspeaker. From one of the windows of the high-story house, the angry at Liana looked out, who wanted to see who speaks the loudspeaker. The guy was a little surprised because he had taken a closer look. He saw the bandaged Zhang Chan on the rostrum. After a short period of time, he was in the director's office because he had an important request. Lianya was influential and allowed himself to communicate arrogantly, and asked the director to allow Zhang Chan to the exams. The man smiled and said that sometimes children can behave ignorantly, and after a while he himself will abandon the academy and get out of here. But the insidious master was no longer stopped, and he wondered how to make Zhang Chenai to expel him, without killing him. The excited director said that it was required to make a lot of efforts to achieve its removal from the exam. Beautiful from his words, and Liangi asked the man, is he really refusing to do what he was asked? The director in response smiled and said that he did not refuse and promised to figure out everything. Soon, Lianya left, and the man sat down at his desk and exhaled with relief, saying that he had almost died. After a while, he was in the hall for exams and told students that the dungeons were scattered around the world, which are a separate world. The director pointed with his hand to the portal and said that this is the entrance to the virtual dungeon, and they will have to go through the test to pass the exam. Then the man added that before the entrance, each of the students will receive a wooden plate and a signaling missile. He said that one of these things is directly related to the test, and the other is needed for their safety, which is worth keeping in mind. The director announced that there will be 3 trials in total, namely rivalry for signs, killing the boss, and finding output. The purpose of the first competition was the battle for the signs, where the more tablets will be fed by the students, the higher the glasses will be. The man added that the same applies to the fight against monsters, in which the more murders are made, the higher the glasses. He said that after performing the aforementioned tests, they will need to find a way out, and the general rating will be posted after their passage. The director advised not to build himself a hero if the students are in danger and use the signal rocket to save them. The students began to offer each other to work in the team because the dungeon is dangerous and the monsters are incredibly strong. One of the guys told the other that the other participants also formed the teams, and the ally said that it would be necessary to attack several people at once. Lianya said that Zhang Chen upset him greatly, and because of this no one would dare to join him, and death will wait for him on every corner. Then he smiled frighteningly and said that the main character would not be able to escape, and this time he would come to an end. The insidious man said that Zhang Chen would not be able to escape because the whole academy is subject to him. Zhang Chen understood that the virtual dungeon was a wonderful place for beating, so Liana would not miss such an opportunity. Then the young man drew attention to the insidious opponent and his company, who looked at him as a victim. The main character was not at all scared and looked at them with a grin, in his thoughts saying that they would still see who would laugh the last. At that moment, Dean Lin unexpectedly approached him, who offered to unite, which was very amazing. Zhang Chen pointed a finger at the back of Leong and asked the beauty if she was afraid of him. Dean Lin smiled and confidently said that she was not, because she was the debtor of the protagonist. Besides, she is a girl, but she can't occupy her strength. The main character smiled and said to himself that the girl worries about him and does not even hide her true motives. Then he said that the association was excellent and agreed to pass this exam together because it would be much safer. One of the students looked at Dean Lin in bewilderment and told the rest that she was walking with Zhang Chanyi. The guy pointed his finger and asked Liang to look at it, and he immediately got angry from what he saw and called the hero a scoundrel. The director, meanwhile, stood at the portal and announced that the exam was starting, after which he asked the students to go in turn. Lianya headed the crowd, and they headed to the entrance to the portal, because he was not going to deal with Zhang Chen. The protagonist, meanwhile, walked ahead of Dean Lin, being confident in himself and his abilities and not afraid of anything. A few minutes later, young people found themselves in a virtual dungeon and began to look around. They turned out to be a dense forest where there were a lot of trees, the green foliage of which even blocked the sky to them. Zhang Chen thought that it really looked like a real dungeon, because even the leaves looked real. Suddenly in front of him was Lianya, who headed the crowd, who said that as he sees, the young man found time to admire nature. In Liangji, with an awesome tone, he asked the guy to think carefully and asked what death he would prefer to choose. The protagonist was not at all scared, and the first few seconds silently looked at the crowd, which looked at him as a victim. The leader of the crowd of hooligans asked a silent boy if he wanted to die, while being ready to beat him. Dean Lin understood that everything went not according to plan, because initially she just wanted to wander around the dungeon with Zhang Chen. Zhang Chen smiled at the beauty standing nearby, and asked her not to worry, and just rely on him in this matter. The young man asked the excited girl to rest aside, and in no case would not fit, while being confident in himself. The shocked Dean Lin did not expect to hear so much confidence in his words, but did not argue. Lianya was angry that the guy also found time for flirting. But Zhang Chen giggled slightly and went to the crowd. Then the main character sternly looked into the opponent's eyes and said that he still did not know how strong the young man is. Liang's associates were shocked by the guy's confidence, and the furious Zhang Chen said that the only one who died was his rival. Without thinking twice, he waved his fist, and Lianya and his crowd froze in place. Then, as they did not expect this from the side of the boy, stunned people from the crowd heard sounds from the abdomen, as well as the sound of breaking bones in the guy. Zhang Chen suddenly stopped and squeezed slightly, and looked at Lianya was in surprise at Liang. The hero gritted his teeth tightly and said that qi and blood were too thick, so he should act a little slower. Lianya and his associates began to laugh, saying that no one doubted that the guy had a blood problem. The insidious man looked at the defenseless guy and said that he was afraid that he would soon receive from him on the head. One of his healthy men began to approach Zhang Chen, and Lianya stood behind him and said that all this was very funny. The long-haired builder grabbed on a confused protagonist by the collar, going to deal with him as soon as possible. Then the right hook was committed in the jaw of the helpless Zhang Chen, who was discarded by the incredible power of the blow to the side. A powerful blow and pain in the jaw was angry with the protagonist, who longed to take revenge and deal with the whole crowd. On the digital scoreboard, 100% resistance was shown, and Zhang Chen also received 1 point of the blow. The hero asked a big man who was standing ahead. He really hadn't eaten yet, because it was necessary to beat more and more. The shocked guy froze in place with his eyes wide open, and the young man said that they all have to be taught. After that, a crowd of harsh hooligans was tuned against him, who looked at him maliciously and were ready to beat. At one point, they all rushed to Zhang Chen, wanting to deal with him as soon as possible, but they did not scare him at all. But still, one of the hooligans waved his fist and hit the hero's eye, who could not stand on his feet and fell. This blow was angry with Zhang Chen even more, and he looked sternly at the enemy, but was in no hurry to strike. On a digital scoreboard, he read that 100% resistance was used, and 1 point of impact was received. The guy got to his feet again and with a provoking smile, asked the bully that he really calls it a blow. The bully did not endure his ridicule and struck his foot in the chest cage Zhang Chen, who immediately spat out the blood. The main character smiled again and asked if the guy was still not weaving from his mother's chest and asked to beat stronger. After these words, one of the hooligans struck the jaw of the daring young man, who allowed himself to be so expressed. The resistance was still 100%, and the damage gradually increased and the blow glasses were added. Blood was already flowing across Zhang Chan, but he still told the bully that he would be massaged with his ridiculous blows. A whole crowd of guys attacked him at that moment and began to beat his feet, hoping to end the upstart. The scale of the damage was gradually filled, but at one point the stern Dean Lin intervened, which asked Lianya to stop it. The confident Zhang Chen surprised the girl, saying that he himself would cope, and understood that he needed to be patient a little more. Lianya asked the guy if he would really hide behind Dean Lin and asked his associates to ask him a 3. One of the hooligans got angry even harder and with a straight blow to the fist fell right into the nose of Zhang Chan, who could not stand on his feet. From the incredible power of the blow, the main character immediately fell to the floor, being dumbfounded, because he did not expect this. He had no strength to rise, and the crowd of hooligans, meanwhile, rushed at the helpless young man to finish him off. The hooligans looked bloodthirstily at the guy, and Zhang Chen in his thoughts said that what should be expected, everything would go well. He looked sternly at the crowd and said that they had severely had to, and they tried to beat him with their feet non-stop. The scale of the damage continued to fill up, and Zhang Chen shouted that the bullets were weak and added that they could still beat in the armpits. Dean Lin was surprised that despite the beating of the young man, his pulse and breathing remained at rest, as if nothing was happening. Lianya took out the phone, saying that such a spectacle should see as many people as possible because it is very funny. One of the students drew attention to the vibration of the phone, which was in the back pocket of his sweatpants. Turning it on the phone, the guy said that Liangi sent his geoposition and says that there is something to see. The rest of the students also saw a notification, and they were curious what he started again. So they all decided to look at this spectacle. The guys at high speed rushed towards the geolocation. Then, how I was putting on to see what was happening there as soon as possible. One of the students asked if this was a trap, and a friend told him that Liangi could get signs without effort, but he is unlikely to now need. Soon, a huge crowd of students came running to geolocation and was surprised by what was happening in the clearing. On the ground lay a relaxed Zhang Chen, who asked the obscured hooligans, "Was it all?" and they already surrendered. The main character raised slightly and asked the guys, they really called a crowd of people to show their worthless skills. The fierce at Liana called the students to laugh at Zhang Chen, but this had a completely different effect. He asked the hooligans why they were standing, and they replied that they were already exhausted, and Zhang Chen generally spit on their blows. The hero called them a herd of garbage and asked why they could not finish the matter, because they almost succeeded. The young man patted one of the hooligans in the face and asked if they realized that they had just put themselves as an absolute laughingstock. He asked Leong why not show him what he was capable of, since his dogs are nothing of himself. Everyone around was very surprised by such a sharp statement, because this could become a very sensational fight. Some students laughed because Zhang Chen dragged Lianya's nose, who froze in place and could not do anything. It was curious for people to see what would happen next, and Liangi was angry every second more and more. Dean Lin Hikakala, because he wanted to expose Zhang Chen, laughed, but nothing came of it, and the rivals meanwhile looked at each other. Liang did not endure mockery anymore and used blood, which was the ability of the highest level to kill the hero. The alarmed shouted Zhang Chen that he was better off to retreat, because the enemy had a rather powerful technique. The reckless and insidious opponent shouted at the top of his voice, hinging a young man who was not at all scared. But at the very last moment, the blow was blocked by a strong block Zhang Chen, which was very amazing. The stunned by Liana froze in place because he could not understand how the helpless-looking guy managed to block his blow. Zhang Chen held his fiery fist tightly, which was filled with blood and powerful technology. The young man grinned the enemy in the face and asked, "Is it really all his power and all that he is capable of?" Except for the chatter. Students began to laugh because they realized that this was all the power of Leong, who even Zhang Chen could not resist. The guy said that he could only rely on the authority of the family and unable to discharge. This was frantically angry with Liang, who squeezed his fist tightly and once again attacked Zhang Chen. He tried to strike a fist in the enemy's chest, but his next attempt was in vain and unsuccessful. The smiling protagonist once again evaded the enemy's attack, thereby demonstrating his dexterity. The scale of damage almost reached hundreds, and Zhang Chen, with a small grin, asked Liang whether it was all. The guy did not understand how it was possible and was angry more and more, but was not going to give up and waved his fist again. This time he managed to make an uppercut, hitting the protagonist right in the jaw and tossing over the ground. From the incredible power of the blow, Zhang Chen was exalted over the ground for several meters, which looked amazing. But still, he remained conscious and he managed to land tightly on his feet, being whole and unharmed. Zhang Chen, as if nothing had happened, was shaken away and asked Liana, "Was it all?" And Dean Lin admitted that she had underestimated him. Leong did not believe that this could be, and the main character grinned and asked him to attack, saying that he would stand everything. His goal was to use the enemy, and after the accumulation of the right number of points, Lianya would end. The insidious enemy got angry and decided to go to extreme measures, after which he took a red pill from his pocket. Lianya's angry at Liana put the blood pill in his mouth and said that Zhang Chen forced him to this desperate act. People were surprised. Then, as a pill subjected to the body mutations, which happened to the man whose strength increased. The system warned the dumbfounded hero that the level of the task was increased to C, so the complexity of the awards increased. The level of the level was to score 150 points, and the bewildered Zhang Chen did not understand what was happening. Stone slabs under his feet began to crack and tremble, which forced the protagonist to be even more nervous. Lianya attacked the young man, but he understood that he could still see the trajectory of enemy movements, which could help him. But at the same time, the protagonist noticed that the enemy's capacity became much higher, which significantly complicated everything. He tried his best to block the blows of Leong, but the bones were not iron and two of them broke. The powerful enemy left no attempts to strike, as a result of which Zhang Chen was pressed to the tree. His clothes were torn and his hands in the forearm area were reddened from the abrasion of scratches left by the opponent. The resistance of the damage was 50%, and the scale of damage did not even reach 100 points of 150. Zhang Chen understood that the damage glasses did not overshadow and could continue, but everything became much more complicated. Then, the exhausted protagonist lowered his head and wondered how much he could hold out. Liang, enraged by Liang, was not going to give the guy to rest and once again rushed at him to strike. The thirst for revenge moved them. At that moment, he wanted to quickly deal with the enemy who stood in his way. At the last moment before the strike, the man turned the case to strike with a foot in the head of Zhang Chen. But in the last second before applying the blow, the main character managed to evade, and Lianya hit a tree with his foot. The young man managed to bounce to the side and remain unharmed, but the enemy was not going to give up and again rushed at him. The malicious of Liang exclaimed that the guy would not be able to escape and made a jerk forward to finish him off. He again swung his foot, using the blow of hundreds of torture, which was supposed to destroy the enemy in one fell swoop. Surprised, Zhang Chen was a little confused because the blow was very sharp and unexpected, so it was necessary to react quickly. Both fists of Liang were endowed with powerful power, and he exclaimed that now he would definitely succeed. The blow was inflicted, but the main character once again evaded, which was very angry with an opponent who wanted to end him as soon as possible. The stone slab under his feet was broken into shreds with an incredibly powerful blow by Liang, who was not going to stop. He continued to tightly squeeze his fist and asked Zhang Chen, was he not going to advance since he had already dodged again? Then the man laughed insidiously, asking for a shy guy to continue in the same spirit. Because he really likes it, Lianya asked the protagonist. Didn't he say that he considered him a cowardly dog, but he himself evades blows? At one point, the blow was struck directly into the tree trunk, near which was the shocked Zhang Chen. A large hole was made in the tree trunk, and Lianya told the boy that he was giving him a chance to give up. He advised him not to resist if he wants to stay alive, but Zhang Chen did not succumb to his provocations. Lianya continued to tease the guy and offered to play well, simultaneously striking his fist. Zhang Chen noticed that the glasses were not read out, but the enemy had two strong attacks, so he dodged. The protagonist gritted his teeth tightly and thought in his thoughts that it was better to succumb to the enemy, so as not to miss powerful damage. Lianya did not lose time and once again made a jump to deliver a powerful blow to the opponent. The jump was reinforced by a jerk forward in flight. Thereby, a powerful knee blow was inflicted on the chest of Zhang Chen into the chest of Zhang Chen. The blow was very strong, as a result of which the main character spat out a little blood, and the scale of damage reached 102 points. The insidious enemy was not going to stop and tried to deliver another blow to the weakened youth. Zhang Chen was thrown aside and crashed into a tree, barely remaining conscious and breathing heavily after blows. He did not know how long the action of the pill would last, so he had to come up with something, otherwise he risked to die. The bloodthirsty at Liangi took advantage of the enemy's weakening and was about to strike a fatal blow to finish the duel. At that moment, the main character looked at the enemy, who reminded him of the Iron Monster, with whom he fought earlier. The young man smiled, because he remembered that over the past few days spent in the hospital, he has accumulated a lot of strength. Lianya did not hesitate and once again rushed with an attack on Zhang Chen, using all his power. The main character tried to remain calm and reminded himself that it was necessary to focus on the enemy and his actions. The opponent involved the style of a huge monster, which was bloodthirsty and was ready to tear the young man. Zhang Chen took into account that despite the high speed, he was still able to track the movements of Leong. The enemy's eyes blushed even more and became bloodthirsty, and he again waved his fist, but the hero calculated his movements. The hero retained calm and understood that he could not act until he could consider the path of attack. The sharp blade turned out to be a millimeter from his face, and even scratched a little, but did not cause a large damage to Zhang Chen. The scale of damage continued to be filled, and Zhang Chen in her thoughts said that he saw the trajectory of enemy movement. An embittered failure of Liang was engaged in an iron fist against the protagonist to finally end him. The observers were excited because they realized that Lianya intends to kill Zhang Chen because he aimed at the temple. The hero continued to remain calm and held the block at the temples, realizing that the opponent was really trying to kill him. With the help of a powerful blow by Lianya, Zhang Chen successfully threw a few meters to the side to take a larger scale. The young man was a little confused because he did not understand the trajectory of enemy movements, but tried to track her down. The guy was as concentrated as possible and watched the trajectory of movements, calling the angle strange. The angle reminded him of the tentacle of the vile monster with whom he fought earlier and who taught him a lot. Lianya again made a break, out forward to make another attempt to attack, being impulsive. Zhang Chen in his thoughts said that in the power and rot, the enemy could not be compared with the beast in the animal cage. He understood that he could still resist him and dodge his attacks, so he still has a head. The enemy made a large scope with his foot to deliver an incredibly powerful blow, considering the young man the weak. The protagonist clenched his teeth and continued to evade blows. I repeat in his head that he could not lose in this battle. Liani's angry at Leong more and more because of failures and asked the young man, finally, to die so that it all ended as soon as possible. Zhang Chen set a strong block and began to endure the blows that the enemy inflicted. But he had no thought to give up. He successfully blocked the blows of the opponent, and the scale of the damage was gradually approaching the necessary 150 points. Lianya continued to endure failures, which was why he was angry more and more, and the number of damage points reached 104. People were surprised that Zhang Chen repelled all the attacks but was seriously wounded. But it seemed to everyone that his wounds were not deep enough. The worried Dean Lin stood aside and in her thoughts said that the young man had not enough good combat skills. She assumed that all due to the fact that Liana ate a pill, after which he panicked and attacked to Zhang Chen. As a result, the main character received serious injuries. In the end, they had a very big difference in strength. But at the same time, Zhang Chen began to predict the enemy attacks, adapting to his speed, which had its fruits. Dean Lin realized that he was either dodging or defending herself to reduce the speed, thereby taking the damage to a minimum. She continued to observe and said that this could be crank up with rich experience, but Zhang Chen in appearance not at all the owner of such an experience. The furious at Liana still did not leave attempts to deal with the enemy and again used the tiger's blow. The tense Zhang Chen analyzed the situation and understood that nothing would come of it, so he needed to find a way to slow down the enemy. Without thinking twice, he jumped to the side, thereby evading the tiger's blow, which could become fatal. The protagonist understood that it was necessary to be more accurate with this beast sleeping in the cage, after which he put a block for blows. Lianya successfully dealt a powerful blow, which, although it was blocked, still threw the young man aside. Zhang Chen in his thoughts said that as he expected, the enemy controls his strength, thoroughly distributing it. Soon, the system notified the hero that the level of level C was made, and he pressed the button to receive a secret award. As a reward, he could choose one of an increase in protection, increasing speed, and gaining the ability of a response impact. But the choice of the young man prevented Liana, who again took advantage of the tiger's fist because he wanted to kill him. Everything turned out not as he wanted, because not bewildered by Zhang Chen grabbed his fist at the last moment before the strike. The protagonist calmly looked into the eyes of Leong, who was confused due to an unexpected situation. The enemy looked at Zhang Chen in bewilderment, and the first stage of absorption was his new skill. Then the young man activated a new skill, namely the second stage of movement, in order to finally end the bastard. After the third stage of absorption was activated, and the angry Jiang Chen was able to swing at Liang with his fist, the enemy was shocked because the main character was able to use his fist of the tiger and strike his jaw. The young man was furious and merciless at that moment, delivering a very powerful blow to the enemy, who caused him so many troubles. The power of the blow was incredibly huge, as a result of which the powerless of Liang was thrown aside. Having landed, he looked excitedly at Jiang Chen, realizing that he had lost his status after this fight. Surprised students were surprised and could not believe that Jiang Chen repelled the blows of Liang and defeated him. The alarmed Dean Lin covered her wide-open mouth with her hand, being the same surprised by what was happening. Jiang Chen sternly looked at Liana and said that he had not finished yet, and then asked if he wanted to continue. The system notified the hero of the new ability, and now he was able to absorb the attack and deliver a response to the enemy. Students looked in surprise at everything that was happening, while a little afraid of the protagonist. They began to raise their leader with Liana, and at the same time they could not believe that he had lost, because he even took advantage of his technique. The leader himself remained silent, and in his thoughts said that all this was impossible and he could not believe it. The rest of the students asked the question, which was really famous for Liana was several times weaker than Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen understood that the new skill was pretty easy to use, and now it has become easier to earn glasses. Then he pointed his finger at the wounded by Leong and asked if he wanted to continue or if they finished the duel on it. The provocative hero said that now Liania looks like a beaten dog and asked his associates if they want to take revenge. The bold statements of the young man angered students, but he began to understand that the atmosphere was suitable, and they almost fell on the hook. Jiang Chen sought to make the students hate him, thereby raising his glasses, which he needed. Nevertheless, Liania's associates began to lead his leader, finally saying that he should wait for them and they would still show him. The worried Dean Lin touched the young man's shoulder, telling him that they needed a sign to pass the exam. Jiang Chen seemed to illuminate. Then he almost forgot about it, after which he rushed for the students and asked them to give signs. The guys tensed very much, because the main character fled at high speed and almost caught up with them. Students began to panic, because there was little strength and they understood that Jiang Chen would definitely grab them. Zhao Jitian suddenly stopped and said that even if he has to sacrifice his life, he would still protect with Liana. The rest of the guys were at a loss and wondered when he became so loyal, because he had not been like that before. Suddenly, another student stopped, who surprised his act, because all this happened very sharply and suddenly. Li sighed and A Lianshan tightly clenched his fists and confidently said that they were remaining to hold the enemy. The last of the students was very surprised and said that he was also left with his associates, because he could not leave without them. But the rest of the guys unanimously said that he should not, because he should protect the leader and he should not rush. The guy threw the wounded man at himself and began to go. In his thoughts, they say that this is a good opportunity and now you cannot rush. Jiang Chen and Dean Lin broke forward, because they needed signs for the exam. The harsh trinity jumped out at them, because for the sake of Liangyi, they were ready for anything, and wanted to deal with the main character. The young man used a special receive, realizing that he would significantly increase his glasses, because these dogs are very devoted to his leader. But suddenly, the protagonist and Dean Lin were very surprised, because they did not expect what happened at all. 3 students fell to their knees and raised their hands up. Then they wanted to apologize and make amends for a powerful young man. In their hands, they held their signs and said that they did not want to cross his road, after which they asked not to beat them. Surprised, Jiang Chen took signs and asked if they really intended to do so to stop him. Dean Lin said that they were specially pretended to be heroes in order to earn the trust of Leong, but were frightened that they would be beaten and decided to surrender. The guys said that they could live calmly, while Leong trusts them, and Jiang Chen smiled and realized what was the matter. Holding the signs in his hands tightly, the young man said that it was time to move on, because it is impossible to linger. After some time, the students wandered through a thick forest, looking around with cautiously around so as not to fall into the trap. Suddenly, a dark purple thorny trap appeared in space, which threatened the safety of students' lives. 2 students panicked and immediately began to run away, because they understood that it was a trap that could become fatal. If 2 more students jumped out, who immediately grabbed them and dragged them along to find out the information. An excited young man asked what they allow himself, but no one was going to let them go, and his hands were extinguished. The harsh, red-haired student said that they did not allow him to lick, after which he pressed the guy's trapezoidal muscles. From the pain in the muscles, the young man shouted at the top of his voice, but no one heard him, and they had no opportunity to run away. Then, with the help of a sharp purple object, which was like a vela, the two prisoners were pierced through and through. After a few seconds, the bodies did not go limp, and two attackers exhaled with relief and lowered their hands. The harsh student with a sword said that it became much stronger due to the fact that Leong had trained a lot. An excited prisoner asked why they were doing this with a cry, asked to immediately let them go. But a student with a sword said that all this for the sake of signs, because the master wants to get them the most in the exam. His harsh ally grabbed one of the prisoners by the hair and ordered to immediately give a sign. The guy begged to let him go, and the student asked if he knew at least something about the correctly arranged priorities. He said that everything that the guy loses is an outstanding future, but the master will lose the title of the first because of him. Then the prisoners were subjected to beatings and threats of reprisals, because when the latter did not want to give a sign, one of the thoughts that fell into a trap said that only the dogs of Liang's are able to behave like that, and this is a continuous humiliation. The guy screamed in pain, could not believe that no one would help. But suddenly, a male voice asked the hooligans to stop doing this. One of the guys immediately drew attention to the voice of a man who allowed himself to intervene in their showdown. As it turned out, it was a confident Zhang Chen, and whose back was a surprised beauty Dean Lin. The protagonist exclaimed in a stern tone that the bastards could beat him, but other people do not have the right to touch him. The hooligans looked at the young man with great surprise, who was confident in themselves, but then laughed and realized that the master had not killed him. Zhang Chen realized that not everyone knew that he had defeated Lianya at Liang, that he was in his hand, because he could accumulate more points. The harsh hooligans rushed at the protagonist, saying that he was unlucky to come across them, and they would immediately beat him. The warned Dean Lin asked if her help was needed, but the young man replied that he was not, and asked to simply watch. He spread his legs wide and was ready for a duel, and the Trinity tried to surround him from all sides in order to prevent him from escaping. They tried to strike at the enemy once overnight, but Zhang Chen reacted in time and put up the block. The shock glasses were gradually added, and the hooligans were wary and did not understand why he was still holding on. The prisoners were surprised because the attacks of the hooligans did not harm Zhang Chen, which was very incomprehensible. The main character looked at the opponents and asked if they were already blown away and whether they want to continue the duel. One of the guys said that he had already reached the limit, but the enemy is still not wounded. And the second of them said that it was very angry. Two hooligans immediately rushed away because they understood that Zhang Chen was not rivals at all, and they needed to take their feet. Dean Lin looked after a runaway coward and shouted that they would not be able to escape, after which she rushed after them. The girl made a high jump and was in front of the runaway hooligans, who did not expect this at all. Then she rushed to flee on them, because she really wanted them to get what he deserved for her deeds. The dexterous Dean Lin immediately waved her right foot and inflicted a double blow to the chest cells of bewildered youths. Both guys immediately clenched their teeth in pain and fell to the ground, because the power of the blow was stunning. The third bully rushed off, but the two wounded stopped him because they wanted him to feel their pain. This was angry with a harsh guy, and he began to beat his ally with his elbow, driving him immediately let him go. But suddenly, right behind him was Zhang Chen, who had already swung his fist, and it was impossible to escape. The power of the blow was so huge that the bully not only did not have time to escape, but was also imprinted in a stone slab. Two prisoners of students immediately attacked the offender, who allowed himself to treat them like monsters. After some time, all three hooligans who committed evil deeds were connected and kneeling by the tree. Zhang Chen and Dean Lin sat by the fire with liberated students, about to ask them a few questions. One of the guys thanked the hero, and the second added that if not for him, then it was scary to imagine to happen to them. The young man, in response, said that there was nothing to thank him for, and in his thoughts said that he had earned a decent number of points. Then he smiled at the beauty Dean Lin and said that without her help, he would never have coped with the bully. The main character, as a sign of gratitude, handed her signs, and the girl with charming eyes asked him not to thank her. The young man also handed the tablet to two students, saying that they belonged to them and asked to believe that they had passed the first stage. Students said that this is his trophy, because the signs can add additional glasses, so they are very important for Zhang Chen. But he confidently said that he already has 4 signs and he would have enough, and continued to stretch them to the guys. Zhang Chen asked the students to simply take signs, adding that in no case would it be in vain. Students thanked the protagonist and promised that they would do everything in their power if he asks for anything. The young man said that he knew that Lianya had a lot of mongrels with him and asked if they were divided into some groups. One of the guys said that Liangi distributed them into groups, and all in order to take first place. The most powerful blocked the path of Zhang Chan. The main character with a smile asked how they would react if he says that he wants a loss of Liangji with his dogs. Excited guys said that his assistants are much stronger than an average student, so this is hardly possible. Zhang Chen did not renounce the goal, and in a calm tone asked that if he dealt with all the consequences. The young man said that Liana is arrogant and is unlikely to interfere with other students because he is his main goal. Then he asked surprised students. They really want to play the role of a pair for whipping all the time. The hero asked if cruelty wakes up in them when they observe all these bullying. Zhang Chen brought the guys to tears, which in fact, everything would only progress and it would be worse if not a rebuff. In the end, he pointed them with a finger and asked if they want to continue to remain those who are now. Initially, the guys did not give any answer and deeply plunged into this topic for thought, weighing all the pros and cons. One of the students decided not to endure this anymore and exclaimed that if at least once it is repeated, he will renounce his surname Zhang. Dean Lin smiled and whispered Zhang Chan that he had excellent oratory skills, because they themselves would not have thought of that. The young man giggled a little when he heard about oratory skills, but in reality he simply shared his life experience. An inspired student asked the protagonist where they should begin resistance to the hooligans. Zhang Chen drew attention to the related hooligans and exclaimed that to begin with, it would be necessary to photograph these idols. He asked the guys to send a photo to his friends and classmates, then how the time came to deal with the dogs. The young man said that the main thing is to say that he was the initiator of everything and promised that he would distribute all the tablets obtained as a result of the showdown. The hero asked that the friends of the students also disseminate the information and stated that everyone would help. Dean Lin realized that he acted in his detriment and wondered if he was capable of such an ordinary student. Then, Zhang Chen rose from the ground and confidently told his associates that it was time to start acting. He added that the time came to start their plan to exterminate with Liana, after which they left the fire, leaving the bound hooligans. There was also a frightened student in a dense forest who fell into the clutches of the dogs of Lianya, holding her hostage. One of the hooligans asked her to give a sign, and if she refuses to do this, he would regret it very much. To horror, the frightened girl began to cry and loudly asked the bastards not to approach her. From the back to the vile hooligans, the cold-blooded Zhang Chen approached, who with a cry ordered them to stop immediately. The dumbfounded guys immediately turned around and realized that it was Zhang Chen, whom they did not expect to see here at all. The hostage, meanwhile, took advantage of the chance and grabbed 2 stones to take revenge on his offenders. Without a second thought, the stones at the same moment were thrown into the back of the bully of the hooligans, who allowed a mistake and turned away. One of the previously prisoners of students joyfully said that they managed to get rid of 2 more dogs at Liana. Zhang Chen called Dean Lin to ask how things are and what successes are. The girl replied that 3 dogs were over, and in the meantime they were kneeling in front of her, being connected. Dean Lin said that the signs would be distributed now, and they will go further. And the hero asked to knit the dogs and send it to the right place. The joyful Zhang Chen looked at the map and realized that they had caught most of the dogs, and all his expectations were surpassed. The student said that this is not surprising because they are not waiting for someone to come to the rescue, and the rescued students themselves began to pursue Sin. But at the same time, he added that in a fight one-on-one, students cannot be defeated, so they hunt enemies in groups, then they attack dogs from the back and mercilessly beat their feet, preventing even the chance to even rise from the ground. The interested young man asked Zhang Chan why he ordered the dog to knit and drag him to the appointed place. The hero replied that this was very important and asked not to forget that they should deal with all the dogs of Leong. The surprised student asked the protagonist, is he really so decisive, since he gives such orders? Time passed and soon in the appointed place there was a lot of bound dogs that she needed Zhang Chan. Students surrounded Lianya's bound associates and began to mock, and they did not understand what they all needed from them. One of the dogs said that this is the second estimated platform, and when the portals open, monsters would pour from there. Liang's dogs began to panic because they heard the sound of the opening of portals, which was not the best outcome for them. A monster with one eye suddenly crawled out of the portal with one eye, which reached for one of the ligaments of the frightened dogs. More and more monsters crawled out of the portal, and the connected hooligans began to panic even more and could not resist. Out of fear, they began to expire with a plentiful number of photos and called to the rescue. But no one was going to help them. Zhang Chen and his other associates were away and watched the monster's nightmare Sin at Liana. At one point, the main character ordered all the students present to run forward and kill the monsters. All of them immediately followed his order and rushed into battle, killing the monsters one after another and preventing them from striking. The director was in the room for observations and saw how the frightened dogs of Leong were in full voice to the aid. The dumbfounded man immediately exclaimed that it was necessary to stop the test and save students as soon as possible. He added that mentally participants can suffer because of the monsters, and it will be very difficult for parents to explain it. The subordinates immediately entered the portal and went to the salvation of students, and the director himself remained at the center of observation. The man understood that Leong had problems, and he would lose his head first because he was responsible for everything. After some time, the students gathered in the assembly hall, where the director was going to make an important statement. He said that the exam was over, and the best student will be invited to go on stage for the award. Zhang Chen, who said that this was just a reward and all this was unnecessary, went to the stage. The hero said that people embarrass him, and the students thanked him for being able to go through the tests and for everything that he did for them. Embalmed at Liana and his dogs stood aside, being crippled after fights with a young man. The leader of the dogs was very furious and angry with Zhang Chan, who became in his way did not interfere with all his plans. The director handed the young man a pill for a breakthrough, a book on martial arts, and a special university card, which were his award. The man added that while he has this card, you can add points when entering any university. All students present in the hall were surprised and said that this was much better than previous awards. Dean Lin said she did not think that Zhang Chen would take first place, and if she had heard this earlier, she would not believe it. Lianya was angry more and more because the ally told him that this award was intended for him. Zhang Chen joyfully raised the award up, and his main opponent from the crowd shouted all sorts of nasty things and wished him all the worst. After these words, the main character jumped down from the rostrum to talk to Liana, who was so angry at him. He began to smile provocatively and said that he heard, initially it should have been a reward with Leong, who was angry. The guy got angry even stronger and asked what now Zhang Chen, who jumped to him clearly for a reason. Students discussed that Zhang Chen was getting around again and wanted to finish the matter, and Lianya severely asked what he wanted. The hero showed him a pill of blood and asked whether if you eat it, you can break into the kingdom of martial arts. The blood pill was of incredible value for Lianya, who began to be even harder and asked what Chen needed. Zhang Chen deliberately burst a jar of pills and turned on acting, provoking the master of the master not to touch him. Then he caught a round orange pill with his mouth right in front of the eyes of Lianya, who did not get her. After a few seconds, the pill was swallowed by the main character, who focused on his sensations. The young man squeezed his fists tightly, and the echoes of new sensations were opened, which he felt at the same moment. Zhang Shan not to occupy, and he exclaimed joyfully that qi began to merge with the body and now you could pour it to any point. Now the main character became aware of how actually the kingdom of martial arts is, but he did not want to be like the one who used blood pills, but at the same time harmed himself, referring to Liana. Dean Lin said that he constantly injured himself because of these pills. Then, as he was not smart enough, Zhang Chen laid his hand on Liana's head and said that the pill was very similar to the one that he had already accepted once. The guy began to be angry, and the hero said that if he ever received another such pill, he would definitely share with him. Adjusted students around could not Zhang Chani, who said with a mockery that he would definitely help with Leong. After that, Liania no longer endured ridicule and asked the protagonist not to compare them because they are very different. In the evening, Zhang Chen sat on the bus and looking out the window said that despite the fact that this was another world, the view was still old and peaceful. Soon the bus stopped and the main character got out of it, approaching the front door of one of the houses. In his thoughts, the young man said that finally, the weekend came, which means that you can return home and rest properly. He looked at the front door and said that he had not seen his parents long ago because he was busy studying. In a past life, Zhang Chan's parents seriously fell ill and he got into huge debts, but still could not cure them. And so, as not to bother him anymore, one day his parents died, which became a very large injury for the protagonist. He did not know if everything was fine with his parents in this life, but even if they were already sick, he is ready to make every effort to help them. Zhang Chen finally knocked on the output door, which was opened by his father, who was very glad to see his beloved son. The main character could not look at his father without tears, recalling the past life where he seriously fell ill and died. The young man immediately hugged his own father tightly, who was even a little confused because of such love from his son. The father did not understand why the son was crying, because they did not see each other for only a week and asked to pass as soon as possible, because his mother had already given him Soon they gathered at the family table to finally have dinner together and discuss what was happening in life. A happy mother applied meat to her beloved child and said that he needed to eat him more so that there was strength. She said that he only has leather and bones and he eats very poorly, and then reminded that it was impossible to save alone. Zhang Chen realized that in this world parents are doing well, but blood and qi weakened, so he could be mistaken. In the Imperceptibly, the protagonist asked the system to open the exchange window because he was curious to know something. Having familiarized himself with the information in the exchange window, he thought about the blood and qi supplements are also considered a medicine. The young man decided to accumulate glasses for the purchase of medicines for parents, because he does not have so many pocket money and preferred to take the supplement from the window. His 2 index fingers turned red and began to radiate some kind of energy, and Zhang Chen watched the reaction. The index fingers were quietly aimed at parents who looked at their beloved child with a smile. At one point, they were very surprised because they began to feel very good and they did not hurt, which was strange. Zhang Chen, as if nothing had happened, should be. As soon as they saw him, they immediately felt better. Father stroked his son on the head and said that tomorrow he would spend all day with him and may not even think about leaning. The young man agreed, and in his thoughts said that parents in this life earn a living by selling vegetables. The next day, the main character, together with his father, was in the market, where he helped him with the sale of vegetables. The happy father asked people to buy vegetables and said that they were fresh and inexpensive, so everyone could approach. Zhang Chen chose to be prudent, even despite the fact that selling vegetables with his abilities is a little stupid. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a male leg, which boldly stepped on a carrot, which was supposed to be sold by his father. 2 men in costumes approached their point, one of whom smoked a cigar with an arrogant face. He smiled at the old man Zhang and asked how things were going with the sale of vegetables, because this issue was very important for him. The man handed the bag with carrots, as gratitude to Mr. Van for providing a place for trade. Van took the package from his hands and asked not to forget to pay for the rental of points tomorrow for the next month. Then he told his son that he should study hard. Otherwise, after graduating from his studies, he would also become a seller. But the young man said that this would never happen. Father laughed and said that it sounds promising, and the boy confidently said that he would definitely become more powerful than him. Zhang Chen understood that he could not allow all this from a scream, asked Van to immediately stop on the spot. The man and his son immediately turned around and looked at the guy in bewilderment, not understanding who he was at all. The protagonist said in a serious tone that Van will have to pay for the spoiled vegetables that he trampled. Father began to worry about his son and took his hand, but the young man was not at all shy and stood confidently on his own. Van asked, he really plans to force him, the head of the market, who gives them all the places for trade, pay for vegetables. He laughed in full voice and said that he was a parent, food and clothes for Father Zhang Chen, so he cannot blame him for anything. His arrogant expressions hit the feeling of the protagonist, who immediately used the ability and waved his fist. A powerful blow was delivered to the jaw of an arrogant bastard, after which he could barely remain conscious. The blow was stunning force, as a result of which the director of the market Van could not stand on his feet and, stumbled, fell to the ground. The bewildered man did not understand how some unknown to him the young man dared to behave with him so impudently. The cold-blooded Zhang Chen looked into the eyes of the director lying on the floor and mentioned the money that he should return right now. The father asked his son to calm down and said that he could not cope with him, but the young man asked him not to worry and said that he would figure it out. The son of the director of the market grabbed Zhang Chen by the collar because he could not allow such a humiliation of his father. He asked the young man in a severous tone what the hell he uses martial arts against ordinary people. Zhang Chen was not shy and asked what he was asking for it and really wants to fight him. The angry son of the market director said that the hero is one of the worst students of the academy and he is at an average level. He gave free rein to emotions and waved his fist, saying that he could definitely deal with such garbage as Zhang Chen. The exact blow to the enemy's face was inflicted, but no damage was followed for this, which was expected. In favor of the absolutely calm Zhang Chen, 100% resistance was involved, so he remained unharmed. The son of the market director was perplexed and did not understand whether his powerful blow did not harm the enemy. The hero understood that there would be too many points to buy medicines for parents, so you can use this guy in order to replenish the balance. The young man was not going to give up and once again squeezed his fist, because he wanted to take revenge on the humiliation of his father. Being embittered, he rushed at Zhang Chen, who at that moment did not use any block and was open. But the main character himself was still absolutely calm and stood still, without even taking a step away. He felt a pleasant feeling and said that it was like a mosquito's easy bit, and called it a pleasant massage. Glasses gradually dripped to the balance of Zhang Chan, who at one point used the ability to deal with the enemy. Then the hero looked at his fiery fist and said that even an ordinary mosquito would eventually get it. After these words, a powerful blow was delivered to the jaw of the son of the market by a fiery fist that knocked out his teeth. On the knocked out his teeth, all this did not end, and the young man slipped a few meters on his back on the market. Zhang Chen stepped on his head and asked what he was waiting if he had previously said that he was in the middle of the raiding. He once again kicked the guy lying on the floor, and the son of the director of the market in his thoughts said that the main character is terribly strong. Director Van asked the hero to stop, threatening that he would order them to turn his bench and get away from here. The young man's father asked for forgiveness and said that his son did not understand that he was creating problems, and added that he should show the significance of the family. But the owner boldly gave him a slap in the face and said that he does not care. He would die or live, but he is obliged to force his youth to stop. Such a cynical act by the director was angry with Zhang Chen, who involved his ability to take revenge. He inflicted an incredibly strong blow to the bastard's jaw, knocking him his teeth and saying that he should be responsible for his actions. The main character asked the director of the market Van, who allowed him to do this boldly and arrogantly with his father. The man shouted at full voice that was already too late and asked them to immediately get out of his market. Zhang Chen looked at him with a smile and asked whether he correctly heard that he asked them to be removed. Then he showed a university card sitting on the floor and asked if he knew that it was. And the man was dumbfounded by what he saw. Van asked the young man if the director really gave him this precious university card. Sweat came from his face with the jewel of the jewel, and in his thoughts he wondered if this guy was a special student. The director remembered that only one student was given a card capable of passing a test, and only students with good skills will be able to get it. He wondered, really, Zhang Chen is not as simple as it seems, but still did not believe, because it is obvious that he was from the family of ordinary traders. The man suggested that the young man met with important people and was able to establish relations with the director. From his pocket, he took out a pack of cigarettes and decided that there is still a chance to fix everything, so not everything is lost. With a smile on his face, Van held out Zhang Chan's cigarette, realizing that he could not afford to stumble again. The young man asked the man if his vision would really bring him, because he is a student and he can't smoke him, and he offers him it. Director Van handed the cigarette to Uncle Zhang, after which he asked for forgiveness. Looking for a mistake, Father Zhang Chen cursed and asked the director of the market, why not talk about everything that was happening? The head of the market confidently stated that now it was wiping with powder of anyone if someone dares to touch the counter of Uncle Zhang. The man kept his voice that he, Tian Van, would make all kinds of efforts for the well-being of his father Zhang Chan. Soon night came, and Zhang Chen furtively entered the room of sleeping parents to do something. He pressed the index and middle finger to each other, after which he directed them to sleeping parents to heal them. Smiles appeared on the faces of their parents, and drops of sweat flowed down their faces, which spoke of the success of the procedure. Then Zhang Chen returned to his room, realizing that he needs 2 medicines to help both, and this is enough to strengthen their health. He picked up a university card and decided that now he should think about preparing for entrance exams. The young man understood that despite the fact that the card would add glasses, it was not a fact that they would give a place to him. So you need to become stronger. Looking at a special card, Zhang Chen wondered if there is any way of a quick set of glasses. He looked at the digital scoreboard, familiarizing himself with the information about the task of the dungeon in which you need to survive a week. The young man remembered that he passed the exam in a virtual dungeon. But the present is many times more dangerous, so you need to think everything over. Zhang Chen knew that each dungeon is a separate world, each of which is different ecology, and even ordinary adaptation requires effort. The young man also took into account that the monsters in each of the dungeons are completely different, which also played an important role. Among the monsters of the dungeons, there were humanoid alien creatures, whose skin color was orange. There was a race similar to animals, whose representatives were often monsters like dragons and snakes. Another of the representatives of the population of the dungeons were harmless and cute, looking elves that were like people. It was also possible to meet the legendary monsters and other population of the dungeons, which were many. Zhang Chen took into account that, unlike the virtual world, in the real dungeon, the chance of death was not excluded, but it is only a week to hold out. With current abilities, the hero only needs to be in the zone of action of low-level monsters all the time. He understood what to do this until he provokes powerful monsters and could earn points. First of all, the main character decided to find a dungeon nearby in order to quickly go to complete the assignment. He immediately came across a dungeon 20 minutes from him and decided that he had to go there tomorrow, after which he went to bed. After a small amount of time, Jiang Chen plunged into a dream. But suddenly, a drop of unknown liquid fell on his face. The fluid in the marshy color spread over the face of a sleeping young man, and thereby he began to gradually wake up. Being very alarmed, Jiang Chen sharply opened his eyes and jumped, trying to understand what was happening. The young man was very excited because he looked at the ceiling. He saw the long and sharp teeth of an unknown monster. The huge monster looked bloodthirstily at a scanty man, after which he began to growl loudly to scare him. Excited, Jiang Chen did not understand what was happening and tried to run aside, so as not to fall into the mouth of the monster. He wondered where the monster came from in his house because he certainly does not sleep, and this is not a dream at all. In the eyes of the hero doubled, and he saw a lot of his clones, which ran away from a large number of monsters. He did not understand what was happening. Jiang Chen, with a cry, wondered what this is happening. Being very nervous, the young man has repeatedly turned to the system to understand what was happening and understand what to do. He received a response from the system that the protection of the world suddenly disappeared, as a result of which everything was destroyed. Nervous Jiang Chen then expired and gritted his teeth, because he still did not understand what was happening around. The hero wondered, was it really the end, and asked the system to explain himself, because he did not understand that it was at all. The young man did not receive any answer from the system, and the red-haired monster, meanwhile, began to chase after him. Jiang Chen had no choice but to rush off in order not to fall into the clutches of monsters and not to be eaten. There were more and more monsters, and each of them wanted to tear the hero, who fled forward with all his might. Suddenly he heard a loud growl, and as it turned out, there was a huge monster behind him with a wide, open mouth. From incredible fright, Jiang Chen woke up with a cry and jumped, gradually recovering and realizing that this was all a dream. For the first few minutes, the young man was breathing very hard, but still began to understand that it was only a dream, and he was safe. The hero realized that the world is under the protection of a large system, and wondered who is the organizer and where they are all located. He wondered that everything was really for the holding of the monsters, but at the same time they were all in the dungeon. Interested, Jiang Chen read a lot of historical books, but nowhere was it said, and he did not understand why. The young man thought about, was it really because this did not happen? Or someone deliberately cleaned everything? The hero understood that the book was just a tool with which the author shows the reality that others want to be seen. He recalled that in his past life, in one of the books, it was said that there was a country where the dishes were washed about 10 times. In another country, there was sweet air. One student from elementary school passed about 10 miles per day. Jiang Chen understood that in fact, all these were fiction and this never happened. But in childhood, he believed in all these bikes. He suggested that he dreams of such dreams because he was a traveler in time and wondered what meaning in them. The protagonist could not understand absolutely nothing at the current stage because he had a very small amount of information. Then he lay on his side and closed his eyes, trying to stop thinking about it and relax to sleep a little. But at the same moment, Jiang Chen jumped up because he realized that he could not stop thinking about it, no matter how he wanted him. The young man took out the phone and, looking at the clock, said that there was still time, after which he began to get out of bed. Soon he ended up on the street and said that it was enough to mess around and we would have to go to the dungeon to examine everything. After some time, he came to the place where there was a crowd of people in which every person wanted to enter the dungeon. The following order asked everyone to stand in line to go further and take turns entering the portal of the dungeon. An absolutely calm man asked people not to rush, because he did not need chaos at all. Jiang Chen looked around and was a little surprised that it was already evening, but there were a lot of people who want to, and around too lively. A few minutes later, he found himself in front of the entrance to the portal, looking coldly at him and about to take a step forward. Suddenly, an observer laid his hand on his shoulder, who turned to the guy, which was a little incomprehensible. A little excited man asked Jiang Chen if he really wants to die and why he came, because students should study. The main character, with little surprise, asked the man, "Are there really age-related restrictions to enter the dungeon?" The guard said that there are other demands, and he has not yet reached the kingdom of martial arts, so he would immediately meet death as soon as he enters. Jiang Chen thought what the minimum requirements were, and even the lower race of monsters is in the kingdom of martial arts. The young man thought out and came to the conclusion that he needed a different plan, after which he turned and decided to go to bed. The system notified him that the deadline for the mission was expired, and the owner is sent to the punishment for the failure to fulfill the assignment. Jiang Chen gritted his teeth from the nerves and admitted that he had completely forgotten about the daily task that is important to complete. He was nervous even more when he realized that everyone around him would see it. After which, he began to run through the crowd to the side. The main character needed to hide as soon as possible, and he broke through the crowd, pushing people in the way. The young man turned to the system and said that he could not do it here and asked if she really does not catch the situation at all. The puzzled others said that the guy was running towards death, that from the side it looked very incomprehensible. Jiang Chen was rushing headlong, but still realized that he was late, and on the run changed the direction of the next forest. At one point, a portal appeared like a black hole, which immediately began to suck in a young man. The nervous protagonist said that the stupid system does not understand anything, and she just doesn't care what he says. But fortunately, only he could see the portal and understood that otherwise he would have long been caught and used as a laboratory rat. But suddenly, with a loud stomp, someone's leg with long, sharp claws of red color stepped on the ground. Behind Jiang Chen, a monster suddenly landed, which was in excellent physical shape and was ready to kill. The hero looked at the digital scoreboard and saw that the purpose of setting punishment was to victory over the monster of the void. He immediately used abilities and said that now he is no longer a weakness who was simply beaten, and asked the monster to attack. The bloodthirsty creature immediately rushed at the protagonist with fists, wanting to tear him to pieces as soon as possible. The mind Jiang Chen remained cold, which allowed him to calculate the moves of the monster and move aside to get around the enemy. Then the first blow was delivered, after which the young man did not stay in place and continued to move forward. The monster drew attention to the hero's blow and with a sharp movement raised his knee on which he was at that moment. Suddenly, the monster waved to the protagonist with his huge fist, which was a reason for confusion. Panic was alien to Jiang Chen at that moment, and he quickly reacted, setting the block to soften the blow a little. He slipped through the floor while remaining intact and looking at the monster, which was dissatisfied with the blow. The hero said that the blow is not bad, but so far the monster will not kill him with one blow, it will never win. The young man did not bother for a long time and immediately used a reflection in order to quickly end the monster and leave the punishment room. An incredibly powerful power of reflection, the enormous monster was thrown aside, not having the opportunity to resist. Jiang Chen understood that this was his only chance to finish the monster, after which he rushed forward and jumped. With a deft movement, the main character jumped directly on the mouth of a weakened monster to deliver the final blow. The hero began to beat the monster, which was still conscious and had hatred of him. The monster tried to squeeze Jiang Chen with his palms, but his plan failed at the very beginning, because he was not so simple. The monster tightly squeezed the hero in his fist and desperately tried to beat his forehead, but this brought very little benefit. The angry Jiang Chen once again repeated the monster that he could not win, after which he again used the reflection. This time, the monster did not survive and with a buoy fell to the ground there, and the main character flew up from his hands. After a few seconds, the monster was no longer alive, and Jiang Chen watched how he gradually turns into dust. The young man smiled, seeing the notification of the system that the punishment was fulfilled and the return to the ordinary world began. Soon he left the portal and realized that the entrance and exit of the punishment room was in the same place. The hero neatly peeked out from behind the tree and realized that he was very lucky, because none of the people saw him. Suddenly, Dean Lin turned to Jiang Chen, who asked what he was doing there and why he was not going to her. The girl said that it was almost time to study and asked what he was doing, and the surprised young man was a little stupefied. The guy with a smile asked Dean Lin if she had seen anything strange, and the girl was at a loss from the question. Jiang Chen scratched his head with a smile, said that now, when he thinks about it, this is not strange at all. Then he abruptly rushed to run and said that he had to go to school, and Dean Lin did not understand why he was behaving so strangely. Dean Lin looked after him, and Jiang Chen did not understand that she had forgotten here if the dungeon is open to those whose level is higher than the kingdom of martial arts. Soon the hero stood by the window and said that relying on the arena of punishment, he could not increase his level, so you need to find another way of earnings. He understood that the faster he would accumulate points, the faster he could buy a pill of blood and chi, and reach the level of the kingdom of martial arts. At the student forum, the hero saw an article that the rich man of Lion was admitted to Dean Lina and was again ruthlessly rejected. Jiang Chen giggled and remembered that this person was his tool for the pharma of the glasses, which is right at hand. Leong and his offspring, meanwhile, were on the football field, where students began to whisper as soon as they saw them. The Trinity with a serious face went forward, and the students discussed the recent fight in which Leong lost his face. He heard these conversations and got angry, asking them to stop trembling behind him and threatening that he would crush everyone. But the angry students immediately answered him, saying that he was still only a talker and asked to look at himself. After these words, the students began to disperse, and the Trinity stood still and did not understand what happened. The impulsive at Leong asked his two associates whether they were aware of what was happening, but they only crossed. One of the guys handed the leader a smartphone and said that he should look at everything himself because it is very awkward to say it. The nervous rich man squeezed and his eyes began to twitch, and he himself began to carefully read the article in the smartphone. It was written at the student forum that the dog, Zhang Chani, tasted the dog for all its vile acts. The angry with Liangi realized that most likely these were tricks Zhang Chan, because no one else would have the courage to do something like that. He began to be angry more and more and represented the face of a smiling protagonist who was sitting at the computer and scribbled nasty things about him. Lianya squeezed the phone tightly and exclaimed that he wanted to settle everything in a few days, but Zhang Chen apparently would not wait for death. Then the bully began to dial the number on the smartphone, and his associates were surprised because they did not understand what he wanted to do. The rich man called his uncle and said that he needed some stray warrior because he wants someone to die soon. He said that he would pay for this service no matter how much it costs because it is very important for him and the thirst for revenge ruled him. One of the guys was in shock because a stray warrior is a type of warrior who became stronger thanks to independent training or unusual phenomena. These people differ from ordinary warriors. Nothing limits them. But for now, they are paid well. They are ready to do everything that is necessary. One of the guys told boss that Zhang Chen is still a student, and if he hits someone from the side, then the school would not leave this all that way. In a calm tone, Lianya replied that while the hero would be outside the school, no one would worry that his body was found somewhere in the forest. In the end, he said that due to the fact that he will have to pay most of his condition, the murder of Zhang Chan would not satisfy him in any way. Then the insidious rich man began to leave, saying that he should still deal with Dean Lin, who had done so with him. After some time, the night came, and Zhang Chen, meanwhile, was in the suburban arena. In front of him stood an abandoned building, and the hero called him a good place in order to deal with someone in the very sneak. The young man again read the message that if he wants Dean Lin to be security, he must come to this building at 9 in the evening. Zhang Chen did not think that he was pulling the girl into this, but confidently took a step forward and said that he would come and save her. The hero confidently entered the building and asked the dog to go out as soon as possible, and added that he knew that he was hiding somewhere here. After a few seconds, the young man was surrounded by hooligans from two sides. Behind him was the leader of the gang, near Leong. The gang leader said that he wanted to deal with Zhang Chana later, but he simply could not wait, so the disassembly will take place today. The hero realized that judging by his clothes, all these people are stray warriors, and he could not even think that Liana would go so far. The young man was not afraid, because the level of stray warriors is usually small, and with his protection they do not pose a threat to him. But the guy drew attention to the most problematic of them, and instinct suggested that he was very strong and possibly a step stronger than the hero. Zhang Chen asked a wandering warrior who he was, because he did not remember that Liana had a servant like him. The big man folded his hands and in a calm tone replied that he had taken up easy work, and that's all that was required of him in this situation. Then he pointed his finger at the nervous of Liang and added that he pays him, so of course he should work for this. Lianya asked Zhang Chen, was he not arrogant quite recently, and why has now changed in the person? The protagonist smiled maliciously and asked if Liana wanted him to be arrogant, and added that he would make it easily. The young man was still surrounded by stray warriors on both sides, but at the same time tried to maintain a cold mind. Someone laughed at his bold statement, and the big man told the guy that he had already seen people like him in the dungeons. He firmly stood in the combat rack, after which he took advantage of the weapon to finally start the duel. The warrior said that such people are either fools or think that they are sages and let dust in the eyes, and then waved his fist. Zhang Chen realized that if a healthy man could compress his blood to such a level, then it must have already reached the kingdom of martial arts. A stray warrior ordered the rest to block all the outputs and prevent the guy from escaping, promising that he would end him. Then he swung without warning, but the protagonist managed to evade, although he was a little confused. With a sharp blade, the big man caught a little young man, as a result of which a small amount of blood from the wound poured. Zhang Chen held on to the place of injury, and looked at the digital scoreboard, where the characteristics of the resistance and the number of points were shown. Having gritted his teeth tightly, in his head, he told himself that it would be quite difficult, because the enemy is very strong. The big man had fingered fingers and looked a little down at a guy who had no danger to him. The nervous protagonist still squeezed his teeth, understanding perfectly well that the enemy's level is higher than him. And because of this, only half the damage is blocked. He continued to compress tightly instead of a wound, and understood that the worst of all was that all the enemy attacks were aimed at killing. Jiang Chen was well aware that he would be killed if he was not careful, so he needs to come up with something. With Lianya, with a smile, he watched everything and asked the guy, "Doesn't he hold the blows well, and this is not the best that he is capable of?" The protagonist acted very unexpectedly and made a sharp jerk forward to do what no one was thinking at that moment. In flight, he waved his palm and asked the bastard from Leong why not recognize it himself. The arrogant rich man was confused and in a panic began to call for help, begging someone to protect him from the attack. Out of fear, he fell to the floor, but a vagabond warrior came to the rescue, who protected him with his body, standing in the way with the hero. At the last moment, Jiang Chen bounced off the wall to the side so as not to fall into the hands of the healthy man and remain unharmed. With his action, he shocked a wandering warrior who defended Lianya, because not everyone could do that. But then he immediately rushed to flee the main character, shouting after him that he would not be able to escape. On the way, Jiang Chen stood another stray warrior, the task of which was not to miss him and detain him by force. The fighter grinned and confidently told the guy that if he is trying to run away, then he first needs to go through him. But unexpectedly, Jiang Chen boldly spat in his face, thereby showing his true attitude to all of him. A stray warrior froze in place, and the main character continued to run away forward from a healthy man who was still chasing him. The man who was humiliated by the guy was shocked by what was happening, because he did not expect such impudence at all. He wiped the spit from his face and, angry, exclaimed that he would kill the insolent Jiang Chen, who had done so with him. But the young man did not give a damn about the threats from the stray warriors, and he continued to run forward. And a bewildered man stood in his way. The excited warrior began to cover his face with his hand and asked the hero what he was trying to do, and then said that only the children spit when they fight. Jiang Chen did not bother with him for a long time and immediately loaded his foot between his legs, forcing him to scream in pain. This impudent act angered a wandering warrior who, in full voice, screamed violently with unbearable pain. He shouted that he was personally dealing with a daring guy who did not waste time and continued to run away. Lianya thought for Lion. Is it really Jiang Chen trying to angry the leader because he beats below the belt, which is a huge humiliation? Jiang Chen did not stop and continued to deal with stray warriors, and pressed one of them with 2 fingers on his eyes. He threw stones in the face for the next fighter, which gave him the opportunity to move on without any special delays. The main character used only vile tricks that allowed him not to spend a lot of time on fights. Wandering warriors chased for Jiang Chen, maliciously threatening him with reprisal for all his daring and arrogant acts. The young man laughed and showed them an indecent gesture, after which he asked them to run faster and rushed forward again. But suddenly, an emergency stop was made to the foot in the face, which the main character did not expect at that moment at that time. One of the stray warriors charged him with his foot right in his face, thereby imprinted in the wall behind, which cracked from the blow. For this, Jiang Chen received 1 point of blow, but after a heavy stop remained whole and looked at the opponents. The crowd of soldiers approached him and the main one asked if he was ready to die, because now his life will end. Heroes grinned and said that all these conversations about his murder would not benefit them to all, and asked why not talk about a cup of tea. But no one was going to listen to him, and the main stray warrior immediately fell into a rage, being ready to break the guy for all his actions. At that very moment, a fierce series of blows was made, which brought Jiang Chen 1 point, which he also needed. 3 enraged stray warriors beat the protagonist in all possible ways, without showing any mercy. The young man was nervous and asked not to beat in the face, and then he asked if they really wanted to score him to death. A wandering warrior laughed and asked he was really afraid, and then added that he should not do what he did. The big man shouted at the top of his voice that Jiang Chen's life ended when he allowed himself to boldly spit in his face. Lianya giggled aside and asked them to end the guy, beating him to such an extent that his mother did not recognize. Jiang Chen lay on the ground, receiving strike glasses, and understood that everything turned out exactly as he expected. He understood that if everyone brings everyone, then the level of the kingdom of martial arts would not beat him with everyone else. The hero realized that so far the leader does not act and simply observes, All the rest are only tools for making glasses. The cold-blooded warrior of the level of the Kingdom of Martial Arts, meanwhile, stood aside and silently watched. 20 minutes later, 3 soldiers were exhausted from beatings and expired later. But Jiang Chen was still alive. In Leong, watching what was happening, he said that this scene reminded him of something, because earlier the hero also behaved like that, with beating. The warrior of the level of the Kingdom of Martial Arts tensed, and in thought wondered what was happening and why the guy is still alive. He drew attention to the fact that, not to mention the wounds, there is not a single bruise on the young man and something is clearly wrong here. Jiang Chen understood that if they beat him for several more minutes, then he would have enough points to climb the Kingdom of Martial Arts. But unexpectedly, what caused the protagonist to strain because all his plans were in jeopardy, the big man of the level of the Kingdom of Martial Arts suddenly intervened, using the ability to strike a young man. Jiang Chen was a little confused, but still, he managed to react and put the block in time to repel the attack. But unfortunately, nothing came out for him, and an incredibly powerful blow broke through the block, after which he went into the solar plexus. The main character could not resist this blow and was thrown aside, and hit his back into the wall behind. The blow was so powerful that the young man stuck to the cracked wall, and the big man looked at him, standing nearby. Jiang Chen still remained conscious, although he spat out a little blood, but received 36 points of the blow. A stray warrior exclaimed that he did not know which tricks are using a boy, but they obviously only tickle him. At that moment, he faded and said that he personally ended with Jiang Chen, since no one could do this.